By any rational metric in this country, race is a huge determinant factor of so much of our lives. And we know, as an example, going to Florida and stand your ground, I'm a black person in Florida has never been able to use stand your ground to defend themselves. Certainly plenty of white people have. We know that racial bias persists in prison sentencing, in kids getting suspended, and kids facing school detentions. We know racial bias exists in every aspect of American life. And not only does it exist, it is really part of our definitional legacy. And this is also, Jonathan Chait wrote this piece kind of contrasting and saying, look, well, there is some problem with sort of this assertion that Republican and conservative politics is systemically racially biased. And look, if you make a very narrow claim, like it's wrong to say every single person who's a Republican is racist, we can accept that. Of course, that's true. But what that argument is evading is really the truly systemic context in which racial politics still defines who we are and drives a certain segment of America's voting population. And, the way that shows up is in Eric Holder being treated with utter disrespect by Louis Gohmert. The way that shows up in birtherism and all this other garbage. And it also shows up with Brit Hume, who was on Fox Sunday, I believe, with Chris Wallace, talking about President Obama and Eric Holder's speeches at the National Action Conference, which took place in New York this past week, and really getting to the heart of his views of how being black have affected Eric Holder and Barack Obama's careers. Let's take a listen to this.
Strikes me as kind of crybaby stuff from Holder. My sense about this is that both Eric Holder and Barack Obama have benefited politically enormously from the fact that they are African American and the first to hold the jobs that they hold. And this, I don't know if he specifically meant race or not. I suspect perhaps he did. But to those two men, race has been both a shield and a sword that they've used effectively to defend themselves and to attack others.
Okay, so let's be clear about this. So President Obama, who, and David Sirota made this point actually in Back to Our Future. President Obama's entire brand and campaign in some respects was modeled after the 1980s Jordan commercials for Nike, which in a certain sense was aspirational, post-racial. President Obama has so studiously avoided identifying strongly with any particular issue and segment of the African American community and projecting himself as a unitary, somewhat post-racial, post-ideological leader. And in fact, the only times that he has ever even stepped into a basic acknowledgement of racial realities, like if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon, or obviously the cop that arrested the professor in his home in Cambridge was probably not acting intelligently. He has gotten harassed and demonized by the entire American right wing. We see people drawing, everything is slavery, this, and dictatorship, that, all from the same people whose political ancestors, at least, if we're being generous, were the ones who would justify states' rights and Jim Crow. Eric Holder is systemically disrespected and has conspiracy theories thrown at him every day. And incidentally, that's an evasion from calling both Holder and Obama out on real things that they have done, like not holding Wall Street criminally accountable. But I think that this Hume clip is important because, if we're just taking this at face value and we're going to play the Chait role and say, look, I don't know if Hume is personally a racist guy or what his actual racial politics are, but this is someone who, in spite of all empirical cultural evidence in his face, can sit in a studio in the 21st century and look at a camera and say, Obama and Holder's race have been a net positive for their political careers. It's very clarifying because we can get more deeper into it. We can say, like, yeah, sure, I'll take what he says at face value and I won't impugn his motives. And what he says at face value is structurally insane. And how do these beliefs persist? We need to get on those questions. I mean, it's truly unbelievable.
It's so easy to be black in America today.
I mean, like, that's the point. And it's to say, like,
It's just
okay,
so incredibly
yeah,
easy.
It's so extraordinarily easy. I mean, and even the points when it's like, if there ever was a point where Obama's narrative of race was politically advantageous, that has already happened after he overcame so many structural barriers that were a result of his race that they more than infinitely cancel out. I mean, Eric Holder has talked about being, working as a DA and getting racially, pulled over because he's driving a nice car as a black man.
Yes.
I mean, okay, so maybe in some hiring process at a very elite level, it was like, oh, Eric Holder's African American, and on top of all of his many qualifications and everything, okay, good, great. But the structure of his life and his ascent in politics has been aided by being African American. I mean, and again, take that at face value. They actually believe that. That, in some ways, is more disturbing than if you were just saying some nonsense to your audience. I mean, it's such a basic disconnect from reality. It's amazing. And that's, I mean, if you want to be like Jonathan Chait, not, okay, all right, fine, not everybody's racist. I won't paint with a broad brush. Well, they're certainly fucking delusional and don't know basic history or sociology.
I think Brit Hume also had a little bit of Game of Thrones on his mind.
Right.
Barack Obama and Eric Holder, they use race as both a shield and a sword.
Yeah.
And they will smite thee at Castle de la Fox.